KC is epic.
Welcome to this Epic Life podcast, where we explore the connection between building a conscious life and building a conscious team or a conscious business. We also break down 3 powerful permissions with our guests. These would be the permission to chill, to pause and reflect and be with what is. Next, we have permission to feel all the feels, which is to embrace our full, sometimes messy, but always beautiful humanity. And finally, 3, permission to glow in the dark. I will be your host. My name is Christopher Carter. You may call me KC. I'm a coach for founders and executives and meditation teacher for organizations. And now let's meet this week's guest. Hey everybody, it's your friend KC. You may notice my voice is perhaps a little gravelier than my normal gravelly gravel, just a slightly different tone. However, our guest today more than makes up for it. I wonder how many more of us would become masters of our craft if we only had the patience it takes to get there while sometimes sucking at it over the course of many years. In the coaching industry over the last few years, there have been few people mentioned more often than Michael Bungay Stanier. Michael's juggernaut success with the coaching habit inspired hundreds of thousands of busy managers to ask better questions rather than telling people what to do. Michael gave me an advanced copy of the Coaching Habit when we first met in 2015 through our mutual friend, Karen Wright. Since that time, it's been amazing to watch the book set a new standard in business books that are actually fun to read while also becoming a case study in successful self-publishing, with nearly 750,000 copies sold. Just let that number sink in for a second. This week, Michael is back with his latest book, The Advice Trap: Be Humble, Stay Curious, and Change the Way You Lead Forever. We get into his approach to following up such a career-defining success. We also go deep into ways to stay curious just a little bit longer versus offering more advice to people. This seems simple, but its benefits are profound. Michael shares what's on the other side of a life built from curiosity. He's also one of the funniest and most genuinely kind people I've ever met. We cover his quirky origin story, which led from Rhodes Scholar to coaching rock star. A little bit from his formal bio. Michael Bungay Stanier is the author of 6 books, including The Advice Trap and The Coaching Habit, which is the best-selling coaching book of this century. Named the #1 thought leader in coaching in 2019, Michael is the founder of Box of Crayons, a company that has trained more than 100,000 leaders, managers, and individual contributors around the world to be more coach-like. In 2019, Michael was named the #1 thought leader in coaching and was shortlisted for the Coaching Prize by Thinkers 50, the Oscars of Management. Michael was the first Canadian Coach of the Year and has been named a global coaching guru since 2014. In his words, his goal is simple but difficult. Quote, to help people stay curious a little bit longer and rush to action and advice giving a little more slowly, end quote. Please enjoy this rapid fire dynamic conversation with my good friend, the amazing Michael Bungay Stanier. You know, the first time I met you, shortly before 2016, I was kind of transitioning out of my corporate job, and you were one of these figures that dropped on my path right at the right time to kind of tell me there was a better path. And the day I met you, you gave me an advanced copy of The Coaching Habit. Have you heard of that book?
I've heard of that book.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it ended up being successful or not, but I know you put a lot of heart into it, and
I did. It's been this amazing experience. I mean, that would have been almost 4 years ago, because the new book, The Advice Trap, is coming out February the 29th and 2020, and The Coaching Habit came out February the 29th, 2016.
Wow.
So it's cool that it's been a 4-year cycle for you. Look how far you've come, and that book, The Coaching Habit's been this rocket for me, and it's almost 750,000 copies sold, a bazillion 5-star reviews. It's really been amazing.
750,000 copies. Did you have any idea that could happen back when you did? Because it's self-published, right?
Exactly. No idea at all. I mean, I would have aspired to and been very happy with 100,000 copies sold, because most books don't sell 2,000 copies. Getting it to 10,000 copies is already something to celebrate. Getting it to 100,000 puts you in a kind of a pretty rare group of people who've sold more than 100,000 copies of a book. to be kind of have a flywheel spinning and kind of edging us up towards 1 million copies sold soon enough. That's mind-blowing.
Wow. Yeah, it is mind-blowing. Was there any superstition involved in setting the release date for the new book based on the leap year factor of the last one?
I just think it was a cool date.
Yeah.
And I did have this idea. I went, look, I don't know how successful this will be, but it means that in 4 years' time, I'll be able to go, hey, it's the first birthday of the Coaching Habit, and it sold X thousand copies. So I was like, I'll be able to fudge some marketing stuff out of this. That worked out pretty well, actually.
So are a lot of people asking you about competing with the previous success of that book?
Actually, not a whole lot of people. I mean, it's a question that's gone through my own mind more than once.
Yeah.
And
maybe it showed up. It may have shown up in one of your videos you released around it about how to go take a different approach, but maybe
you got to. I mean, Liz Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, did a TED talk about this. She's like, well, Eat, Pray, Love is this random and amazing success. And everybody's like, what's your next book going to be? And it's like, this is the disappointing follow-up to Eat, Pray, Love. And there's part of me going, this is the disappointing follow-up to the Coaching Habit, because the odds of it being a smash hit like the Coaching Habit was pretty small. Not zero, but still pretty small. But at a certain point you go, well, look, here's all you can do. You can only invest in the process. You can't control the outcome.
Yeah.
It's like the launch. At the moment, we're 3 or 4 days away from the book launch, and everything feels like urgent and unfinished and not prepared enough, and it's not going to be the launch I dreamt of it being. And all of that's true. But all of it doesn't really matter that much, because actually, in book launches, as with life, it's like, what are the daily actions you take over the next year or 2 or 5 years that allow good things to start happening? And that's the commitment.
Yeah. It's been really cool to watch you. I was talking to Charlie Gilkey. He's down here in Costa Rica with me working at this event we're doing.
Yeah.
And I was saying that watching you launch a book is really inspiring, because I see you trying all these ideas that I've never seen anybody do before. So I think it's the kind of witnessing the culmination of all of your box of crayons stuff, like all of like the hyper creativity stuff, but then in this really focused direction around a launch. It's really cool. So I want to see how that process is going for you this time out.
Well, thanks. Ainsley is the person on my team who's working closely with me on this. And I'm like, Ainsley, we've already won. The book hasn't launched yet, but we've already won. So let's celebrate the fact that we're about to get a book out into the world, and some people have already bought it, and we've got a website up that, mostly works. So we've already celebrated it. And then there's that piece around how demoralizing marketing and promoting can be, because you just feel like you're, like, please, I'm selling my body on the streets of commerce. And I'm like, okay, how do we do this in a way that's fun? How do we do it in a way that's values aligned? How do I do it in a way that celebrates the people who are supporting me rather than celebrates myself the whole time?
Yeah.
And that gives me energy to go, this is interesting and fun and worth doing.
I think that comes through a lot in your writing voice. I think there's a lot of factors that made the Coaching Habit so successful, but what makes it so easy for me to evangelize and give that book out to clients is that it's a manual on how to coach, but it's written by, this really funny, self-effacing, like we're all in this together kind of guy. And I was wondering if that same approach that you take to the marketing, do you apply that when you sit down to write this thing in your voice? Does that come natural for you, or is it challenging each time out?
I feel like I'm an interesting mix of strong self-confidence and a willingness to be self-deprecating, because I see the absurdity of it all.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have a pretty solid ego and a pretty solid sense of my own self-worth, and that I'm kind of whatever happens externally, I'm a good person that lives a life according to the tenets that I think are important for a moral life, which is trying to contribute to the planet and do good work and help leave people better than I find them, all of that sort of stuff. So I've always had this sense of, let's call it worthiness.
Yeah.
my parents look at me and they're like, who are you?
Where did you come from?
Yeah, because my parents are great people, but they're not, I wouldn't say they're confident, self-promoting people. But I just showed up with that wiring and that privilege, if you like, of confidence. So, here's a story that embodies some of this. At the age of, I don't know, 7 or something, my mum took me to join the Cub Scouts in Australia. And I went in, and when she picked me up, 2 hours later, I was like, "Hey, I'm the sixer of the small group, the kind of the leader of the small subunit within the Cub Scouts." And she's like, "Well, how did that happen?" And I said, "Well, like I looked at the other guy who was the leader and went, I'm more experienced at this than you are. I should be the leader." And he just gave it to me.
Wow.
And I was like, what the heck? And it's every soccer team I've played in, or at least certainly when I was a younger guy, I was like, I ended up being the captain because I'm like, I am the captain. That's the role I'm good at. I should play that role. And so I've got a degree of that willingness to go, look, I'll step into a spotlight because I'm good at it and I'm worth it. On the other hand, it's like we all know people who start believing their own press.
Yeah,
like
right.
You're a little too brittle and a little too invested in that sort of external image you have of yourself.
Sure.
And I'm like, I'm pretty wise to the many, many ways that I'm a deeply flawed human being.
Well, what I love, one of the stories that always sticks out to me with you is, I don't know if this was just part of your backstory, but you said the first time you introduced yourself to me, you said, for a good chunk of my life coming out of Oxford, because I believe you went to Oxford, correct?
Yeah.
That you were terminably inhirable, and I was like,
oh yeah,
wow. And then you end up with this brand, this personal brand. I don't know. I'd love to know how much of this was, by intention, or if this just evolved out of you being you. But when I see the silhouetted shot of you in your pompadour, and even a silhouetted shadow shot, I could tell that your shirt is probably an audacious pattern of some sort.
yes,
right?
It is.
Right. You could feel it coming, those patterns.
Yeah.
And how much of that is just, I guess it comes now with you being the leader of your company. Like nobody's there to tell you what to wear or how to be, but did that kind of evolve naturally for you? Because I see a lot of people trying to work on a personal brand that, don't quite hit it.
Yeah. I've, when I was at university, I used to sew my own clothes because I found men's clothes boring. And so, my nickname, everybody knew me in Australia growing up as Stan. So my name then was Michael Stanier, because when I got married, I became Bungay Stanier because I took my wife's name. Mm-hmm. But in Australia, I was Michael Stanier, and Stan is my nickname, and everybody knew me as Stan. And so I actually created my first little brand was clothes that I sewed, and it was outstanding design.
Oh, awesome.
And I would make, loud shorts and loud shirts because I'm like, I can, and it's actually not that hard. And everybody thinks I'm amazing because I can sew a pair of trousers. But that's only because people don't know how easy sewing trousers are. But I'll take it. Like, I'll take the credit for being amazing, even though my shirt's falling apart and the sleeves are on the wrong way round and all that sort of stuff.
Oh my God.
So I've always had a degree of wanting to be a little bit different and willing to stand out. And then what you see in terms of my voice and my personal brand, Casey, you know this as well as anybody, which is it comes a lot through repetition.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been writing. I started writing my first email newsletter, almost 20 years ago now. And, it's varied how often I put that out over time, but it's like, sometimes it was once a week, sometimes it was once a month, sometimes it was once a quarter, but I have written a lot.
Yeah.
And over time, I've, honed my voice, and, I've presented on stage a lot, but, I've continued to polish and amplify what I think works, what I think plays to my strengths. And I spend a lot of time going, what am I good at? Yeah. And how do I try and double down on that? And I know that I'm good at translating stuff, so taking complex ideas and making them feel accessible. I know that I'm funny. I know that I'm best as a facilitator rather than a straight keynote speaker. So I know a bunch of things, and then I've worked to become really good at them. So it's not just a lucky break. I'm like, I've worked really hard to go from being already a pretty good presenter to being a really great presenter around stagecraft, around blocking, around physicality, about nonverbal influence. All of that is built into everything I do.
Wow. Well, thanks for giving voice to that, because, I believe that some things can be hacked, but mastery cannot be hacked. That there's a lot of showing up that needs to take place if you're mastering an instrument or mastering facilitation, coaching, all the things. And it's reassuring to hear people say that you put your time in.
Oh, and in so much of it is in deeply unglamorous ways. I mean, I'm here in Anaheim at the moment and about to go and do a presentation in front of a couple of thousand people. And then I'm off to give my first TEDx talk in front of another couple of thousand people. And these are the culmination. I just remember first moving to Toronto 18 years ago and kind of signing up to do something for free. And 4 people showed up, and we were in some crappy hotel room, and it went really badly. And, it cost me money. And I was like, wow. And I've just spent a lot of time in badly lit, low ceilinged hotel rooms with groups of people who were thoroughly disinterested in everything I had to say. I mean, I've done some hard yards in all of this.
Oh my God. So I wrote a side note here. Is it, if you ever start playing an instrument, I can't remember. Do you play any instruments?
I play a little ukulele. I can play guitar a little bit as a result of that. I know what a keyboard is, but I can't really play it. But yeah, if I'm going to claim an instrument, it would be ukulele.
All right. Well, if you ever need me to back you up on something, I think our band name should be called the Loud Shorts, because you said that phrase, and I'm like, Loud Shorts is a pretty sweet band name.
That's good. Well, you need to buy the URL, loudshortstheband.com.
Let me work on that. You have a little bit going on this week.
Okay.
So shifting over to the advice trap, do you consider the advice trap to be a companion piece, a sequel, or a prequel to Coaching Habit?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because various people have suggested all 3 of those are the right positioning for that book.
Wow.
Here's why I wrote it. So the Coaching Habit went kind of nuts and super successful, and I get a steady influx of emails and messages in various forms going, thanks for the book, it's been really helpful. I've used it, I've practiced it, it's changing the way I show up with the people around me, whether that's my family, whether it's a team, whether it's some other context. I'm like, amazing. And there's a bunch of people in that world who've looked at the book and gone, the book's pretty good, I like it, I get what he's saying, and I haven't changed a thing. Nothing's shifted, even though I want to.
Yeah.
I'm actually interested in the whole idea of being more coach-like, but for some reason, I find that really hard to do. How do you move from a default response of wanting to give advice to staying curious a little bit longer? Because that's the outcome that we want. Can you stay curious a little bit longer? And so the book is written as a deeper dive into what it takes to change your behavior. And so in the same way that the Coaching Habit starts with a chapter on habit building and going, look, habits are the building blocks of behavior change. I'm like, that's true, but not the whole truth, because you can't build a habit unless you've found a way of being committed to the change that you want to make. And the opening part of this new book is actually exploring the difference between easy change and hard change. And easy change is something that we're all pretty good at. And the metaphor I use is it's like downloading an app onto your phone. In other words, it's additive to the person you already are. It's just adding a little bit of new skill to who you are. So anytime you walk into a new hotel room, or you get a new phone, or you taught something in your yoga retreat and you're like, oh, it's a new pose. You kind of like, oh, I get it. And you practice it and you get better at it and you get to a good enough stage and you're like, okay, that's excellent. I'm done here. That's easy change. We're okay at that. Hard change, of course, is trickier. And a hard change we all know as well, because it's the stuff that we keep trying to do and we keep failing. And we're like, is it me? Am I just a morally inferior person? Or is it like, have I not found out have I not found out all the information yet? So you go and watch some more videos and listen to some more podcasts and read another book. But for some reason, you just can't seem to crack what seems on its surface to be straightforward.
Mm.
And the metaphor for this is if easy change is downloading the app, hard change is needing to upload a new operating system. You kind of need to rewire yourself. Another way of thinking about this, Casey, is if easy change is additive to present you, hard change is a commitment to future you. You're like, I need to rewire myself to become the different, better version of myself that I aspire to be.
Mm. Oh my God. Wait, one second. There's so much good stuff in here to quickly unpack. So
there's a lot there. You're right.
Because I feel like you're going deep into, this is my other biggest question about you is like, for a guy that doesn't, you told me once that you weren't really keen on one-to-one coaching, but you are kind of coaching obsessed. So you're kind of becoming, a face of the movement, but what you're talking about right here is deep into the psychology of excellent coaching, like looking under all the layers of what really kind of creates lasting change for people. And what I heard in there is like this deep commitment to future you.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. And there's a lot in your question, right?
Yeah.
I am really interested in what it takes to change your behavior to become the best version of yourself.
Mm.
And I just want to acknowledge how hard that is.
Oh, it's brutal.
It's really hard.
Yeah, right.
It is really hard. Even if you know what you're doing, it's still really hard. If you don't know what you're doing, it's a disaster. And there's a lot of noise out there about, it's the 10 steps, it's a this, it's a that, it's this simple habit, it's this hack. And I'm like, Sometimes that works, but mostly for easy change stuff. And it doesn't work for the hard change stuff. And hard change is like the place to wrestle with, because at its essence, when you're dealing with hard change, here's the question that you run into and the choice that you have. You go, what must I say no to about how I'm showing up now, even though that has its benefits, so that I can say yes to something else that's future you.
Mm-hmm.
So in some ways, this is like the fabled marshmallow challenge of kids. You've heard of this, 2-year-olds giving a marshmallow, and they're like, if you cannot eat this for 5 minutes, I'm going to come back and give you a second marshmallow, or you can eat it now and you don't get the second marshmallow.
Which group of kids would you fall into? Because I know exactly where I would fall.
Well, I don't know.
Can you delay gratification, or?
I have strong evidence on both sides of being both strong and being weak. And of course, the twist on that research is it's in some ways the finding doesn't take into account privilege, because it turns out that many of the kids who were able to resist the initial marshmallow, so they got the bonus, were whiter and wealthier and more privileged than the kids who weren't able to do that. The kids who go, I'm actually pretty hungry because we don't have enough food at home, and a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush, so I'm just going to take the marshmallow now.
Right.
So that's another 3-hour conversation around that. But the bigger picture is like, I'm committed to figure out the hard, interesting, messy change that people wrestle with. And that is a key skill, I think, for coaching at its best.
Yeah.
I don't do one-to-one coaching because, and partly it's an impact thing, which is I think I can make a bigger difference by writing the books and by giving the talks and by giving other people the skills to be coaches.
Yeah.
And partly it's I'm also a bit impatient, and so often the commitment to be with somebody
for an hour at a time or whatever,
and keep the relationship at the right kind of pitch, so it's intense enough and it doesn't kind of collapse into a bit of a overly comfortable conversation. I'm actually not that good at it, turns out. So I'm like, okay, get out of the way, let really good coaches coach. And I'll do what I can to support them.
Well, I totally feel what you're saying, because I kind of fell in love with coaching by accident. Karen Wright, who you mentioned, is a mentor and friend of mine. And I always thought I was a one-to-many solution. And the more I got into coaching, the more I fell in love with it. And I always feel like your work is kind of air cover for it, that,
Right.
so like all of my clients at some point want to become a coach themselves on some level, to their kids, to their team, to whoever. And I always,
Right.
Coaching Habits very easy to hand over because it's a great entry point.
Thank you.
So on the other side of that messy kind of difficult behavior change, like, so the advice trap still focused on managers, because I know the Coaching Habit was mostly focused on busy managers.
It really helps if you're writing a book to have a very specific person in mind as your ideal reader.
Mm-hmm.
And so for both of these books, I'm imagining a woman who's a director or a VP. She likes her work. She's got a good team, or a good enough team, and she's kind of bumping into the limits of her leadership and the limits of that team's impact. And she's saying to herself, what do I do differently to try and make it work better for me and for them? But, part of the power of the Coaching Habit was it was an evergreen book that appealed to all sorts of people. So I get notes from parents and from coaches and from people being coached and plenty of managers and the like who seem to appreciate the book. So, time will tell whether this new book has the same evergreen feel to it. I wrote it in a way that means that it's not obviously a business book, but it may still just find its niche in terms of it's more for managers and other people.
Okay. So what's on the other side of that kind of messy, longer term commitment to change for managers or leaders? What does like a commitment to curiosity look like? What does it open up for them?
Well, I think that if you do that work to make being curious longer a key part of how you show up and how you behave, I think it makes you a more expansive person. And you could say a more expansive leader, but I think it's just a more expansive human. Because I think with curiosity, it's a bedrock for three key attributes. It's a bedrock for greater empathy, which means that you're better able to see the other person. I think it's a bedrock for greater mindfulness, which I would frame in this context as better able to see reality and what's really out there, and better empathy for greater humility, which I would say is a greater capacity to see you and who you are. And when you have that curiosity, it allows you to see a richer understanding, a richer, more complex, more interesting picture of the world, because you see yourself, you see others, and you see reality. You see more of all of that. And when you combine that, you just have a richer life.
So to come full circle back to this podcast, we explore these three permissions, this concept of three permissions: the permission to chill, which is kind of like what you're framing as mindfulness, which is to kind of be with what is. The permission to feel all the feels, which is to be a messy, gorgeous human being. And then permission to glow in the dark, which I feel like you can't help yourself these days. Do any of those permissions kind of resonate with you where you are this week with the launch, or what comes up for you?
Well, I'd say two of those three are key tenets to how I'm framing 2020. So rather than setting goals, I've set a kind of a phrase as my way of navigating through the year. And the phrase is cut loose. And cut loose has a double meaning. One is it's because I've stepped away from being the CEO of Box of Crayons, and I'm sort of building a new personal brand, mbs.works. And so kind of cutting loose from 20 years being the leader at Box of Crayons. But it's also cutting loose in terms of just being a little more out there, a little more myself, kind of trying to step back into a fuller expression of who I am. And the three key drivers that contribute to cut loose, one is be exuberant, and that's definitely glow in the dark.
Check.
Yeah, exactly. One is be a host, so kind of gather people and connect with people. And the third is to create big and small. But one of the pieces I'm doing, both around exuberance and around creating pieces, to try and do a better job at feeling the feels, because I'm not that good at that.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of exploring some stuff that is a way of trying to connect to, look, if I can get a better sense of some of that stuff going on, that's going to open up potentially all sorts of interesting stuff for me.
That's awesome. It's really mirrors my own journey. All my breakthroughs the past few years have been around feeling the feels. We just want to skip that one on the way to glowing in the dark, but there's a lot there to unpack.
Exactly.
So just last question to come full circle here is curious about what your TED Talk is on.
Yeah, it's going to be called How to Tame Your Advice Monster. So that's
Awesome.
a throwaway line from the Coaching Habit, and it's become a central part of the new book, The Advice Trap. So I've got 12 minutes to try and not screw up a big opportunity.
Well, and how's the prep going for you so far? Because I know
it's pretty good. Yeah, this is at Reno, so they're a big TEDx, like 1,800 people or something.
Wow.
They're like, no, you will be doing an outstanding performance, and we will make sure you get there. So yeah, I'm practicing every day.
Oh, exciting. Well, I'm so happy that you could make time for us today. I want to get you to the church on time because I know you have a slate of interviews today. And thank you so much for being with us today.
That was amazing, Casey. Thank you.
And thanks to all of you for spending time with us. To learn more about anything we discussed today, please head on over to thisepiclife.com for all show notes. We'd really appreciate a review on iTunes, and your feedback is always helpful, so please pop on over to iTunes and leave a review. And also, please get in touch. My email is kc@thisepiclife.com. You could also find us on Facebook and Twitter at This Epic Life.